My son's new wife sued us for excluding her 6 kids from our will, but court found her hiding child support from 3 exes and ordered her to pay us instead. Now she wants us back. I, 65 female, and my husband, Robert, 68 male, have always prided ourselves on being a close-knit, supportive family. We raised 3 children, Mark, 42, Emily, 39, and Josh, 35, with the values of hard work, honesty, and the importance of family. After decades of saving, careful planning, and sacrifices, we managed to build a modest nest egg, intending to pass it down to our children and grandchildren. That is why what happened recently was so unexpected. Mark, our eldest, was married to Laura for 10 years. They had 2 beautiful children together, Amy and Ben. Even after their mutually agreed divorce, we maintained a strong relationship with Laura, who continued to be a loving mother and a respectful ex-daughter-in-law. Mark was always a devoted father, and we admired how both he and Laura prioritized the well-being of their kids during the divorce. Moreover, I loved Laura like my own daughter, and that's why I especially was pleased with the fact that Laura remained part of our family. 3 years ago, Mark met Sarah, 38, a colleague from work. Their whirlwind romance took us by surprise, but Mark seemed happy, so we welcomed her into our lives with open arms. Sarah had been married 3 times before, with 6 children from those marriages, ranging in age from 4 to 16. We knew this would be a major adjustment for Mark, but we hoped he had found happiness. We did our best to embrace Sarah and her children. Our motto throughout our life has been the more the merrier, so we happily included them in all family gatherings, holidays, and outings. My husband and I like to take our grandkids to Disneyland once in a while, and it was so much more fun when we had Sarah's kids join us. We even helped Mark and Sarah financially when they needed a larger home to accommodate everybody. Mark and Sarah's blended family needed more space, and we were more than happy to assist financially. After all, we had always prioritized the well-being of our children and their families, and this was no different. We thought it was a gesture of love and support, something that would strengthen our family ties and provide a comfortable environment for Mark, Sarah, and their kids. However, the goodwill we extended seemed to take a different turn as time went on. Sarah, who had initially expressed her gratitude, began to exhibit a growing curiosity about our financial situation. At first, it was subtle, a few questions about our retirement plans and our plans for future expenses. Robert and I assumed she was merely interested in ensuring that we were well prepared for our own future, but as time went on, her comments became more direct. She started making passive-aggressive remarks about how all the grandchildren should be treated equally in our will. Robert and I tried to explain that while we loved her kids and cared about them a lot, our resources were limited, and we had always planned to leave our savings to our biological grandchildren. The outcome of these discussions wasn't the best, so we started to avoid this topic. Things took a more complicated turn when we decided to update our will. We called a family meeting, including Mark, Sarah, and our other children, Emily and Joshua. We also wanted Laura, Mark's ex-wife, to be there since this included her children, but Laura said that Sarah might not like seeing her husband's ex-wife at a family gathering. We respected that because not everybody is a fan of their husband's ex-spouse, and that was okay. So, we disclosed the news, explaining that our estate would be divided equally among our children, with specific funds set aside for the education and future of Mark, Emily, and Josh's kids. Everyone seemed delighted with this prospect. Our daughter, Emily, went as far as telling us not to worry about her, but we knew it was our duty as her parents. But then came Sarah with a question that by Mark's kids, we also meant her 6 children, right? I was scared this would come up and calmly told her that we really wished we could provide for them, but as we had said earlier, our main priority was our biological children and grandchildren. Sarah's reaction was explosive. She accused us of favoritism and discrimination, and even went as far as to say that we were punishing her children for circumstances beyond their control. Mark tried to calm her down, but it was clear he was torn between his loyalty to his new wife and understanding our perspective. The meeting ended on a sour note, with Sarah storming out and Mark following her, trying to calm her down. The tension didn't stop there. Over the following weeks, Sarah's attitude became more confrontational. She began spreading rumors within the family, accusing us of being greedy and unfair. She even started telling her children that we didn't see them as part of the family, creating a toxic environment that strained our relationships with Mark and our other children. We tried to resolve the situation by suggesting that Mark and Sarah make separate financial provisions for her children. We even offered to help them set up savings accounts for the kids, but Sarah was relentless. She insisted that all the children, biological or not, deserved an equal share of our estate. Then, the situation escalated to a level we never expected. One evening, we received a court summons. Sarah had decided to sue us, demanding that her children be included in our inheritance plans. She claimed that by excluding her children, we were causing them emotional distress and creating an unfair family dynamic. We were absolutely devastated. We had never imagined that our own daughter-in-law would take such extreme measures. The legal battle that ensued was stressful, to say the least. It drained us both emotionally and financially. Sarah's legal team argued that her children had a right to be considered equal heirs, as they were now part of the family. They portrayed us as outdated, discriminatory, and uncaring. It was humiliating and exhausting. We were shocked and hurt. This wasn't what my husband and I had planned for our retirement years. Never in our wildest dreams did we imagine we'd be dragged to court by our own daughter-in-law over our personal financial decisions. We had no choice but to hire a lawyer to defend ourselves. To make matters worse, the lawsuit divided our extended family. Some relatives, particularly those who had only heard Sarah's side of the story, sided with her, believing that we should be more inclusive. She made up many stories about how ignorant we were towards her kids and would always isolate them during family gatherings. One of her stories was that we would not let Sarah's kids sit at our family table during family gatherings, and would tell them to sit in some other room. This was completely untrue. We treated those kids just like our own and included them in every activity. If I heard this story from someone, I would have also been convinced that I was pure evil, so I did not blame our friends and family. Others, including Emily and Josh, our children, stood by us, insisting that we had the right to distribute our assets as we saw fit. Family gatherings became battlegrounds, with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. Throughout the ordeal, we continued to try to maintain a relationship with our grandchildren, including Sarah's kids. But it was clear that Sarah had poisoned their minds against us. She would cancel planned visits at the last minute, make excuses for why her children couldn't spend time with us, and even accuse us of favoring Amy and Ben in front of the other kids. It was heartbreaking. As our lawyer, who had been our rock throughout this ordeal, reviewed the evidence for Sarah's case, it initially felt like we were losing. Sarah had built a strong narrative, presenting herself as a victim of our supposed unfairness. For a time, it seemed like the court was leaning in her direction, making us fear the worst. Determined not to give up, our lawyer decided to dig deeper into Sarah's past. She reached out to one of Sarah's ex-husbands to gather some background information. What started as a simple check for Sarah's behavior during their relationship quickly turned into a major breakthrough. During the conversation with Sarah's ex, it was revealed that he had been paying child support for 3 of Sarah's children. No one in the family knew about this. When the topic ever came up, Sarah would say that she hadn't received any sort of support from all 3 of her ex-husbands and that she alone raised her 6 kids. When we first heard about this, we were surprised and applauded her courage. Now we knew the truth. While this was unexpected, it wasn't enough to cover the needs of all 6 of her kids. So, our lawyer continued investigating. To our shock, it turned out that Sarah had been receiving substantial child support payments from all 3 of her ex-husbands. She had never mentioned this in court. The total amount from these payments was more than enough to provide for her 6 children, yet Sarah had been pretending to be financially strapped, making it seem like she needed our inheritance and Mark's support. This discovery was a game changer. Our lawyer compiled all the evidence and presented it to the court. The revelation was explosive. Sarah had been hiding her financial situation, misleading the court, and trying to manipulate us emotionally. The courtroom atmosphere shifted dramatically. The judge did not like this. Sarah's earlier claims of financial hardship were suddenly called into question. The judge's questions became sharp, demanding explanations for Sarah's failure to disclose her true financial status. Sarah struggled to defend her actions. Her facade of being a struggling single mother began to crumble. The more the judge probed, the more apparent it became that Sarah had been dishonest. In the heat of the moment, Sarah's attempts to argue that the child support payments weren't enough fell flat. The judge's frustration with Sarah's lack of transparency was clear, and her credibility was quickly diminishing. As Sarah's credibility unraveled, the courtroom was filled with whispers and shocked glances. The judge's final questions were particularly damning, challenging Sarah's integrity and intentions. The room was tense as the judge expressed his displeasure with Sarah's misleading claims. I could also tell that this was unexpected news for Mark. He was as surprised as we were when we found out. Except, it was more painful for him. Knowing that he stood up for his wife against his own family, but she had been hiding this information this whole time, must have been heartbreaking for him. In the end, the court ruled decisively in our favor. The judge upheld our right to distribute our assets as we saw fit and ordered Sarah to compensate us for the emotional distress and legal fees we had incurred due to her frivolous lawsuit. She was also charged with a penalty for concealing her assets from the court. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read. Sarah's face turned white, and Mark looked utterly defeated. As we were leaving the courthouse, Sarah approached us. Her entire demeanor had changed. She was no longer the aggressive, entitled woman who had dragged us through months of hell. Instead, she suddenly wanted to settle things, suggesting that we should let go of all the misunderstandings and move forward as a family. She had all the kids with her and told us that Mark and the kids would not be able to handle this sort of emotional distress. We were too stunned to respond and simply walked away. Now, we're left wondering where to go from here. While we feel liberated by the court's decision, our relationship with Mark is deeply strained, and we worry about the long-term effects on our family dynamics. Sarah's sudden change of heart feels insincere, especially after everything she put us through. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for standing our ground and refusing to include my son's new wife's children in our inheritance plans? Should we try to reconcile for the sake of family harmony, or stand firm in our decision given everything that has happened? Update 1. First, I want to thank everyone who offered advice and support. Your comments gave us a lot to think about, and we truly appreciate the empathy and understanding you've shown. A lot has happened in the past few days, and I wanted to give you an update on where things stand. The day after the court verdict, Mark called us. He sounded exhausted, his voice heavy with something I hadn't heard in a long time: regret. He asked if he could come over to talk, just him, without Sarah. Robert and I agreed, knowing that this conversation was long overdue. Mark arrived that evening, and the sight of him broke our hearts. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually well-kept appearance now disheveled. As soon as he sat down in our living room, the weight of the past few months seemed to collapse on him all at once. He broke down, sobbing into his hands, and we just sat there, letting him get it all out. When he finally spoke, it was an outpouring of apologies. Mark admitted that he had failed us, failed to stand up to Sarah, failed to protect us from the turmoil she had caused, and failed himself by letting things spiral out of control. He revealed that Sarah had been pressuring him for months to convince us to change our will. She had spun the situation as one of fairness, repeatedly telling him that her children deserved just as much as our biological grandchildren. When Mark tried to reason with her, pointing out that it wasn't about fairness but about the reality of our financial situation, Sarah became more insistent, even threatening to leave him if he didn't support her in the lawsuit. Mark shared that he had felt trapped, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his love for his parents. He admitted that deep down, he knew Sarah's demands were unreasonable, but he felt powerless to stop her. He was afraid of losing his marriage, and in his desperation, he let Sarah take the lead, even though he knew it was wrong. It was clear that the situation had been eating away at him, and now, with the court's decision, the full weight of it had come crashing down on him. As Mark continued to talk, he revealed that this wasn't the first time Sarah had caused issues in their marriage. Apparently, Sarah had a history of financial disputes with her ex-husbands and their families. Mark explained that when they first got together, he noticed a pattern: Sarah always seemed to be in the middle of some conflict or another, usually involving money. He had brushed it off at the time, chalking it up to her difficult past, but now he realized that it was a red flag he should have paid more attention to. We spent hours talking that night, with Mark opening up about the challenges in his marriage, his fears for the future, and his regrets. Robert and I listened, offering our love and reassurance. We told him that while we couldn't change the past, we would support him no matter what decisions he made about his marriage. We also urged him to consider counseling, both individually and as a couple, to help him work through the issues that had brought them to this point. The next day, we received a call from Laura, Mark's first wife. She had heard about the court case from Amy and Ben, who were understandably upset about the whole situation. Laura, who has always been a steady presence in our lives, offered her support. She thanked us for always being fair and loving grandparents to her children and expressed her sadness over what had happened. Laura told us that she had spoken to Amy and Ben, reassuring them that they were loved and that this conflict didn't change how much we cared for them. Her kindness and understanding were a balm to our weary hearts. As for Sarah, we haven't heard directly from her since the courthouse. However, through the family grapevine, we've learned that she's been trying to garner sympathy, portraying herself as a victim of our supposed cruelty. She's been spinning a tale about how we mistreated her and her children, using the court's verdict as evidence of our unfairness. Some relatives, particularly those who weren't privy to all the details, have been swayed by her version of events. They see us as the villains in this story, despite everything we've done to try and keep the peace. But, thankfully, others have seen through her act, recognizing it for what it is: a desperate attempt to shift the blame and avoid taking responsibility for her actions. In the midst of all this, we've decided to focus on what matters most: healing our relationship with Mark and maintaining strong bonds with all our grandchildren. The court's decision may have settled the legal matter, but the emotional wounds it left behind will take time to heal. We've decided to seek family counseling, something we believe will help us navigate this complex and painful situation. It's not just about moving forward, It's about finding a way to rebuild the trust and love that has been damaged by this ordeal. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. There's still a lot of uncertainty about what the future holds, but we're determined to stay strong as a family. I'll keep you all updated as things progress, and once again, thank you for your continued support. Update 2. Things have taken an unexpected and disturbing turn since my last update. Just when I thought the dust was beginning to settle, a new crisis emerged, one that has shaken us to our core and forced us to confront the possibility that this conflict with Sarah might be far from over. Yesterday morning, while Robert and I were babysitting Josh's kids and going about our usual routine, we received an unexpected visit from Child Protective Services, CPS. The arrival of CPS at our doorstep was shocking, to say the least. We had no idea what could have prompted this visit, but the moment the CPS worker introduced herself and mentioned an anonymous report of emotional abuse and neglect of Sarah's children, my heart sank. It didn't take long for us to suspect who might be behind this. The CPS worker explained that they were required to investigate all reports of potential child abuse or neglect, regardless of the source. She assured us that this was just a routine inquiry, but the implications were terrifying. The idea that someone, likely Sarah, had made such a serious and false accusation against us was both infuriating and deeply unsettling. The worker asked to speak with us individually and then conducted a thorough inspection of our home. She checked every room, every closet, every corner, taking notes as she went. Robert and I were cooperative, explaining the entire situation, including the recent court case and the ongoing conflict with Sarah. We showed her the documentation from the court proceedings, which clearly outlined the nature of the dispute and the court's ruling in our favor. As the visit continued, the CPS worker's initial formality began to soften. She seemed to understand that this was more than just a family dispute, it was a case of malicious retribution. She reassured us that based on her initial assessment, there was no evidence to support the claims made in the report. She thanked us for our cooperation and left, promising to follow up with a written report in a few days. The whole experience left me shaken. We've been through a lot over the past few months, but this felt like a new low. It's one thing to be dragged through the courts over money, but to be accused of harming children, especially children we've tried our best to welcome into our family, was devastating. Later that afternoon, we received a frantic call from Mark. He had just found out about the CPS visit and was horrified. Mark was in full-blown panic mode, his voice trembling as he spoke. He confirmed our suspicions that Sarah was behind the report. According to Mark, when Sarah found out that he had visited us alone the other night, she flew into a rage. She accused him of betraying her, and in her fury, she threatened to make us pay for what she perceived as a slight against her and her children. Mark was distraught. He told us that Sarah had become increasingly erratic since the court verdict, lashing out at him and the kids, and refusing to let go of her anger. She had been trying to manipulate the situation further, using every tactic she could think of to maintain control, even if it meant tearing the family apart. During our conversation, Mark revealed something even more concerning. He had been in contact with a divorce lawyer. This wasn't a decision he made lightly, but after everything that had happened, he realized that Sarah's behavior was toxic, not just to us but to him and all the children involved. He was deeply worried about the impact this ongoing conflict was having on Amy and Ben, as well as Sarah's kids. Mark told us that he had been doing a lot of soul searching since the court case, and he now saw Sarah's true colors more clearly than ever. The CPS incident was the final straw for him. He couldn't continue living in fear of what Sarah might do next, and he certainly couldn't allow her to continue using the children as pawns in her twisted game. We advised Mark to document everything, to keep a record of every incident, every conversation, and every threat that Sarah made. We emphasized the importance of prioritizing the well-being of all the children involved, and we urged him to take whatever steps necessary to protect them from the fallout of this toxic environment. As for us, we've decided to take additional precautions as well. We've installed security cameras around our property, just in case Sarah decides to escalate her actions further. The last thing we want is for this situation to spiral into something even more dangerous. We've also been keeping a close eye on our interactions with family members, knowing that anything we say or do could potentially be twisted and used against us. The family remains divided over this whole mess, but the tide is slowly beginning to turn. More and more relatives are starting to see Sarah's true colors. They're realizing that this isn't just a case of a misunderstood daughter-in-law trying to do right by her kids, this is something far more malicious. Sarah's actions have gone beyond what anyone could consider reasonable, and the lengths she's willing to go to in order to get her way are becoming increasingly apparent. We're doing our best to stay calm and not engage in any direct confrontation with Sarah, following our lawyer's advice. It's hard, especially when we see the toll this is taking on Mark and the children, but we know that reacting impulsively would only play into Sarah's hands. Right now, we're focused on supporting Mark as he navigates this difficult situation. He's made it clear that he wants out of this toxic marriage, but he's also worried about what that will mean for his stepchildren, who have already been through so much. Mark is a good man, and he's trying to do the right thing by everyone involved, even as his own world is falling apart. As for us, we're trying to keep our heads above water. This whole ordeal has been exhausting, and we're not sure what the future holds. But one thing is certain, we won't let Sarah's manipulations tear our family apart. We'll keep fighting, and we'll keep protecting the ones we love, no matter what. I'll update you all again when we have more information. Thank you for your continued support and advice during this incredibly difficult time. Update 3. First and foremost, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to everyone for your support and advice throughout this tumultuous ordeal. The past couple of weeks have been a whirlwind of emotions and events, but I believe we're finally starting to see some resolution and clarity. A few days ago, Mark made the difficult decision to move out of the house he shared with Sarah. He's currently staying with a close friend while he figures out his next steps. This decision came after a series of shocking revelations about Sarah's continued manipulative behavior. Mark discovered that Sarah had been secretly contacting his ex-wife, Laura, with alarming claims. She told Laura that Mark had been drinking heavily and had become aggressive, suggesting that Laura should not allow their children, Amy and Ben, near him for their safety. Laura, to her credit, saw right through Sarah's lies and manipulation. She immediately informed Mark about Sarah's deceitful attempts to turn her against him. Laura's support has been a crucial anchor for Mark during this chaotic time, and we're grateful for her clarity and strength. As if that wasn't enough, Sarah's lies didn't stop there. She reached out to Emily and Josh, further spreading chaos and discord. She told them that we didn't care about them or their children and that everything was going to be given to Mark in the end. Apparently, Sarah had overheard a conversation between Mark and Robert during a family gathering, which she twisted to fit her narrative. Emily and Josh saw through Sarah's erratic behavior immediately and confronted her directly. When Sarah realized that her manipulation was failing, she abruptly ended the call, further demonstrating her desperation and volatility. This latest betrayal was the last straw for Mark. He has since filed for divorce from Sarah and is seeking full custody of Amy and Ben. He's also working closely with his lawyer to address the false CPS report Sarah had filed. The gravity of the situation has hit home for Mark, and he's determined to protect his children and ensure that Sarah's attempts to manipulate and deceive are properly dealt with in court. Sarah, now facing the fallout from her failed schemes, has attempted to contact us multiple times. She has left tearful voicemails, apologizing profusely for her actions and begging us to convince Mark to give her another chance. We have chosen not to respond to her overtures. Instead, we are keeping all communications for potential legal use, ensuring that we have a complete record of her attempts to mend fences in the wake of her failed manipulations. In the midst of all this turmoil, we've had the opportunity to spend some much-needed time with Amy and Ben. Sarah hadn't left them in peace either. Now when they look back, they keep recalling incidents when Sarah made them feel left out. She would often compare Amy's achievements to her own daughter and told them once that they were too reliant on their father. They are understandably shaken by the events that have happened, and we've done our best to reassure them of our unwavering love and support. We're working with Mark to ensure that they have access to therapy and stuff to help them process and cope with everything that has happened. Their emotional well-being is a top priority for us, and we want to make sure they have the support they need during this challenging time. Regarding Sarah's children, our concern for their well-being remains strong. Despite the conflict with Sarah, we don't want her kids to feel abandoned or rejected by the family they've been a part of for the past few years. Mark agrees with us and is exploring ways to maintain a relationship with them, potentially through supervised visitation depending on the outcome of the divorce proceedings. We hope to find a way to continue being a positive presence in their lives, despite the current circumstances. The extended family has largely rallied around us and Mark in recent days. Those who initially sided with Sarah have reached out to apologize after learning the full extent of her actions and manipulations. We're in the process of slowly rebuilding those relationships, as trust and understanding are being reestablished. It's a long road, but we're hopeful that we can mend these familial bonds over time. Through this experience, we've learned several valuable lessons. While we don't regret our initial decision regarding our will, we recognize that our communication about our intentions could have been clearer from the outset. In light of the recent events, we've decided to set up a small trust specifically for Sarah's children's education, separate from our main will. Although this trust is not as substantial as what we've set aside for the others, we hope it will provide some support and demonstrate that our issue was never with Sarah's children themselves. Looking ahead, our focus is on healing as a family. We're continuing with family counseling to help navigate the complex emotions and dynamics that have surfaced. We are also taking proactive steps to legally protect ourselves from any further attempts by Sarah to cause trouble or disrupt our lives. Mark is making progress each day, though he has a challenging road ahead with the divorce and custody proceedings. We're optimistic about the future and grateful for the strength our family has shown in facing this crisis together. Once again, thank you all for your unwavering support and advice. If there are any major developments, I'll be sure to keep you updated. For now, we're focused on moving forward and rebuilding our lives in the wake of this challenging chapter.